Good evening, almost. How are you?
I'm good. The Grammy tonight for...
Well, welcome everyone to the Willenda Hall Library. Welcome to the UXPA KC event affiliate event with KC Design Week. We're so excited and grateful for your attendance and for joining us here. And yeah, we'll be hearing from some really exciting folks tonight. My name is Lisa Mayoni, she, they pronouns. I am a associate art director, associate professor, Jesus, associate professor of graphic design at Kansas City Art Institute, and also serve on the UXPA board with some colleagues most of you have met. In the front, we have Kate Horvat and Maya Coleman and Frank Miles.
Thank you. Yeah, my name's Frank. I forgot what I do. I'm a UX designer at an agency here in Kansas City, but more importantly right now, I'm on the board of UXPA KC with Lisa, everybody else. And yeah, I'm very excited you're all here. Thank you for coming. This is going to be great.
Yeah, we're excited about this program. This is our second year partnering with the Linda Hall Library, and we should be using the technologies that are here and available to us. But a little bit about us and a little bit about this partnership. So the Linda Hall Library, as a science, technology, engineering, history library, we love the connection between user experience and thinking of how it is that we interact with people, with places, with things every day, and how this has been a part of our development of technology. So seeing UXPA KC here is meaningful to us. As far as UXPA, if you're unfamiliar, it is an international organization, and here in Kansas City we have a mighty and small chapter. Many of you have been involved both in events and on the board in the past, so wonderful to see your faces. And ultimately we advocate for UX and design thinking to be a way to build exceptional organizations, products, and services, and for it to be, again, I think the key word there is advocate. How can UX be a way to support and serve the people and places we're in? If you'd like to join us and come to any of our conversations, events, etc., we have a really active Slack. We have a virtual community there that Frank had a huge hand in nurturing and honing the last few years. We'd love to see you in those conversations there.
And if you join the Slack, you get a very nice form message from me, full of emojis. Worth the price of admission. Just a little thing, other than this, we also do a bunch of other events throughout the year. We do a lot of happy hours, a lot of lectures, a lot of sort of you get together, networking, meet people, get a portfolio review, get some guidance on something, just other people doing this in Kansas City. So if this is your first UXPA event, I hope it isn't your last. If it's not your first, glad you came back. Please come to more. And you can find out more about that on Slack or on the website. Or if you want to get involved, you have a topic, or you want to lead your own panel, or you have an idea for an event, please let us know. We're always pretty much open to most things that are UX relevant. I had to kind of catch myself with that one, but like I said, we're small, we like to advocate. If you want to be a part of this, we would love to have you.
Absolutely. Again, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to talk to any of us here this evening, and also feel free to come to our website for other details. All right. So again, thank you, Linda Hall, for having us. We are so pleased to introduce to you and introduce to the evening 4 speakers. As we were thinking of and envisioning this evening, we were thinking, okay, so last year we talked about UX as something that was both within sort of like teams and collaboration in sort of architectural projects and urban spaces, in the way that we navigate strategy and understand sort of like what other ways can a designer and a design thinker sort of collaborate in office spaces and in projects. And we really loved how it opened up kind of where UX is found, not just on our apps, on our computers, but really kind of in the ways that we build the spaces and interactions around us. So building on that, we decided this year we really wanted to make sure that we wanted to expand on what it means to think about UX as it relates to accessibility, what we are accessing when we mean accessibility. And we thought this particular group of folks from multiple ends of the Kansas City design community here represented different kinds of ways of addressing this sort of like multivalent city that we're in, and the ways that we are developing and growing the ways that we interact with it.
And those 4 people, the the 4 people. First up, we've got Tom Guerin from the Kansas City Streetcar. He's the executive director. He'll be up first. Then we've got Keith Kirkland, who's a Leonard Pryor Fellow at KCAI. Then Bianca Zardizava, who is a UX designer at Cascade Health. And last but certainly not least, Libby Eddings, who is a senior UX designer of accessibility and inclusion at Oracle Health. And at the end of that, each of them will speak for a little bit, and we'll have them all back up here for kind of a question and answer discussion panel. So if you have any thoughts, anything, write them down, save them till the end, and hopefully it'll be a very good conversation.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much. All right, so to kick us off this evening in this affiliate KC Design Week event, we will be hearing from Tom Jang.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me back there in the back? Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm not sure. My first reaction was I feel like, as the public infrastructure kind of transit guy, with these folks who are really into UX and coding and programming and some really cool stuff, I don't belong. But hearing more about the goals of the program, thinking about the importance of user interfaces, experiences, particularly in the context of accessibility, public infrastructure, right, is an important part of our daily lives, and public interaction with that infrastructure is oftentimes things we don't think about. So happy to be here to talk a little bit about the public infrastructure space, and specifically some of what we're doing with Streetcar and some of the lessons, frankly, that we've learned in terms of the importance of this conversation relative to the public work that we're doing, not just on transit, but projects around the city and around the region. Again, Tom Garand with Kansas City Streetcar Authority, and happy to be here. So, I'm gonna be relatively brief, but I think as we think about our current infrastructure, as we think about public transportation at large, the barriers are really immense, right? Our region's big and sprawling. We have barriers not just around the experience that people have, but the quality of the services, the level of the services, and the barriers that they impose on daily lives. We didn't understand the impacts of some of these. We knew the importance of ADA and the importance of experience and accessibility. We felt like it was important until we launched our starter line, though we really didn't understand the power of true accessibility and some of the lessons learned from, frankly, things that were intentional and some things that were unintentional that just happened to work out that opened our eyes. So here's a few pictures just of in the transportation space currently, and there's nothing wrong with any of these pictures. It's just a reality of the barriers that people have to deal with as they think about experiencing, right, public transportation today, whether it be through a school bus on the image on the left, a traditional bus in the middle with a ramp being deployed, or on the right is a picture of an individual being secured in a handicap accessible space inside a vehicle. All very common procedures that are used. Really important as we think about services that are in fact accessible, but each one of these has significant barriers, whether it be sort of perceived barriers or real barriers that impact and limit the ability for people to have the same experience on these services regardless of ability. And so for us, and it's not just, I will say, not just Kansas City that has a lot to learn. I would say across the country and actually across the world, there's been a lot of progress made, whether it be through ADA or just other strategies and intentional efforts. This is just a picture from the UK on, again, really known for world-renowned public transportation, and you look at it through the lens of user experience and accessibility, and there's room for improvement here, right? This isn't the optimal. And so for us, what we've done with Streetcar is we focused on a fully level boarding experience with our vehicles and with our station stops. We did this really with a goal and a focus on accessibility into lowering the barriers of use and entry. What we didn't realize is sort of the profound impact something, just removing a 4-inch step would have on how people would access our system, on what it would mean to them, on what it would mean to adjacent users who live up and down or work up and down the route, and the fact that it would actually be ultimately a catalyst, and the accessibility would be a catalyst for folks coming to downtown to experience the accessibility, right? You think of it as a necessity for people to go, get what they need to get or go where they need to go. What we found was those things are all true, But because it was such a significant differentiator from the norm, that we actually have people coming into downtown or choosing to live downtown because of the accessibility and the experience that it provides. And so this is a picture of a platform in a streetcar with people walking on, walking off. You may know, I didn't go into any of the context, but we opened our initial project in 2016. It was a 2-mile system. We're getting ready to triple the size of that in the next 24 months, and we're going to be extending all the way down here to UMKC in just a little over a year. We will be operating down to 51st and Brookside Boulevard, and we're really excited about that. So a few of the attributes of our system that make it unique, I talk about level boarding. You see that in the picture. This is, again, an aspect of design. It's one of the differentiators as we think about lowering the barriers to entry. One of the things that running on rails allows us to do is to control the gap, right? Mind the gap. We can control the distance of that gap very precisely because we don't have to worry about a steering wheel, right? An operator turning a steering wheel, getting close to the curb, deploying a ramp, right? It's designed into the system intentionally, and it allows us to control vertical elevation of the vehicles and the platforms and that interface, which is so very important as people move from one space to another space seamlessly. This is a picture of obviously the wheelchair accessibility. We did some tests early on with a user group to hone in on this, and really, really remarkable, because the picture that I showed you before with the typical bus where you deploy a ramp, an individual comes, uses the ramp or a lift, gets on a vehicle, and then has to be tied down by an operator. What does that mean? It means everybody else on the bus is waiting for that individual. It means that individual is being treated differently in terms of how they're having to be accommodated. Still super important, right? We need bus connectivity in lots of places, and we need options. Is it the same level of service that we can provide with a streetcar, where somebody can literally roll on, fix their wheel brake, and just like everybody else, the vehicle can move, right, with no additional interventions or limitations. And that's really, really powerful stuff, and to be able to roll on and roll off. So another thing that's unique about our vehicles in Kansas City specifically is they're what we call 100% low floor. So most transit vehicles around the country have steps inside. So you board in typically in the middle, or a bus oftentimes also has steps. But in most vehicles, you board and then you have steps over the wheels on the end. So the ends of the car aren't accessible. Our vehicles are the only in North America that are 100% low floor. So no steps. You can board the middle doors. You can access the entirety of the vehicle, the seats, the space, and have the same experience as everybody else on board the car, right? That's really significant and impactful. And it's not just wheelchairs. Obviously, it's all mobility devices. It's bikes, it's scooters, it's strollers. It provides flexibility for everybody. And so as we think about, our goal is to really to maximize the impact and leverage of the asset and the operation of the system. One way we can do that, and are doing that, is by lowering the barrier to entry, making the experience as seamless as possible, making the system as easy to use as possible for everybody, not just for folks in wheelchairs, but for everybody. We want it to be intuitive, easy to use, and fully accessible. The other thing that is also unique about our platform design that I didn't really talk about is, in almost all cases, we have ramps on both ends of our platform, so it's not just one end. Both sides of our platform, we strive to be accessible, so everybody has two options for accessing those middle doors, not just one side, which provides a shorter line of sight. This is really just an example of groups that have come down. We're really excited about the Main Street extension because we're servicing the whole person and a number of other users on Main Street in Midtown who have a need for services, and access is really important to not only their facilities, but to all that downtown has to offer. Schools, children accessing Science Center, Science City at Union Station. Really cool to see the interaction. So I'm gonna sort of shut down and say we have a lot of work to do in the public space, right? Streetcar is not the right solution for all of our transportation problems, but this lens of how we're viewing accessibility of our services is really key, and it's really impactful. And there's real power in accessibility as you think about it through the lens of public infrastructure. And when we don't do it right, like this picture where we've got a great bus stop with a shelter with no accessibility, so folks who have needs can't access it, right? The impacts are very real. And so we have a lot of work to do in other areas of public investment and infrastructure. I think for streetcar, we've modeled an experience that lowers the barrier to entry for everybody, and we're seeing the benefits of that and are really excited to grow it. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk more about what we're doing in this space at the back end, but I'm going to pass it back to our host, and I think we're going to transition to the next speaker.
All right, thank you very much. Speaker number one. Speaker number two, I believe, Keith Kirkland. Welcome to the stage.
And good evening, everyone. Excuse me, let's try that again. Good evening, everyone. How's it going? My name is Keith Kirkland, and I am a bunch of things, but none of those things are important right now because I need you to pay attention to one thing, and haptic means touch. If you don't remember anything from anything that I say today, as long as you take away this one sentence, you pass, right? Thank you for that one. Okay. I'm going to start my timer so I stay on track. So here's we go, right? Into the world. Haptics. What does this mean, right? So I like to say haptic is for skin as optic is for eyes. But a lot of people don't listen to me when I say that, so I made a rap about it instead. And so I'm going to share the first verse of the rap with you so that you can learn what haptic means, all right? We have a vision. We have a vision. We have a vision of a world that doesn't need vision. Elevate and touch to the level of sight and sound, and that's our mission. Research spending. Today is access tomorrow for all of our children. Look at the spending. Over the last 100 years, spread over each of the 5 of our senses. Seeing is believing, yup. Most went to vision, second went to sound, which is pretty far distant. For 100 years, money only spent on 2 senses. Isn't that senseless? That is just senseless. Here's my 2 cents, and vision is king and touch is in prison. Patriarch of all the senses of sight? Who really made that decision? Who the F made that decision? No one with limited vision, none of the 285 million, and wasn't hearing the 460 million folks with limited hearing. Digital, so sight and sound driven that it left like a billion on the wrong side of a digital divide, virtually no pot to piss in. The future is touch, that's our mission. Where works is haptics, touch with the weight and intention of dramatically making a difference. You need to listen. We have a vision. Right, okay. Thank you. So my name is Keith Kirkland. I am a haptics expert. It's really easy because it's like 12 of us, right? You know what I'm saying? I picked a really great niche to focus in on. My background, mechanical engineer, accessories designer, industrial designer. I like a bunch of stuff. I do anime. I watch anime. I don't do it. I wish I could do anime. I watch anime. I do archery, martial arts. I rap. I skateboard. And I like learning Swedish, right? I'm also the Leonard Pryor Fellow at the Kansas City Art Institute. I'll talk a little bit about what that is and what my role in that world is for a bit, but just know that like I've left startup land for a bit, came here because I saw some really amazing opportunities in the accessibility and research space, and now we're kind of jumping in, right? So all in all, I'm a designer, right? I love this Buckminster Fullerton quote. A designer is an emerging synthesis of artist, inventor, mechanic, objective economist, and evolutionary strategist. That feels about right, right? But, you know, a big part of my work and a big part of my world, you know, after my 3rd degree, and, you know, you can't go to college anymore for existential crises after 3 times, apparently. I decided I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life, right? And I realized that there was these 3 big bubbles that like most of the things that I was personally interested in. And I decided to spend my thesis year trying to figure out how these bubbles would connect. I'll tell you where I got to, but let's just say that these bubbles have been my bubbles for the last decade. I've explored all different types of work in these particular spaces. Touch by design. So my mission is to build a world where designing for the sense of touch is as simple, approachable, and accessible as designing for the sense of vision and hearing, right? Digital has become synonymous with audio and visual. That means most of the information that we consume is being designed just for 40% of our sensory capacity. That's kind of crazy when you think about how much digital information you consume, right? Now, 100 years ago wasn't a challenge, right? But today, that creates huge disparities for the 745 million people who don't have ready access to sight and sound, right? So the problem, digital means audio and visual. Touch, we're basically going to create the third lane into the digital communications highway. And so haptics, for me, is all about bringing touch into the digital world. So now I'm not going to show you this video, but I started this company called WearWorks. We made this product called Wayband. And Wayband helped the first person who was blind or visually impaired run the New York City Marathon without needing a sighted running guide back in 2017. And so, you know, we did a lot of press, a lot of opportunities. More importantly, we did it with only $50,000, you know, like, and with 2 months of development time, we made history. Probably because we couldn't get the money any sooner, but, you know, goes to show what you can do with not a lot of money and not a lot of time when you have the focus. 1 billion people use navigation apps every month. Well, sorry. 1 billion people use Google Maps every month. Right? But looking at a map isn't always safe. Oftentimes it's not practical. And of course, for all of our friends, which, you know, age-related macular degeneration and diabetic retinopathy are the leading cause of blindness. One person over the age of 62 has a visual impairment. So it's kind of like that college thing, like look left, look right. Designing for our future selves, important, right? So we invented Wayband, a haptic navigation app, and a wristband that gently guides you to an end destination using only vibrations. If you download that QR code or like scan this one on my shirt that I'm wearing right here, you can download the app and try it out for free on iOS and beta and Android. Right? And the way it works is we have this thing that we call the haptic corridor. It feels like an invisible hallway, but what it really actually is a compass that when you're going the right way, you feel no vibration. When you get to the edge, you get a tiny vibration on both sides. And when you're 180 degrees the wrong way, we give you the loudest vibration we can. Super simple, highly effective. We simply combine maps and haptics, right? And we saw a super huge market opportunity that inspired us to do so. We got patents along the way, filed for our innovative way of navigating people using the sense of touch. And we raised over $1.5 million through grants, direct investments, Google, EY, Verizon, the Cerebral Palsy Alliance, National Science Foundation, BMW, Mini Cooper, and others. We also got to give a TED Talk. So WearWorks is a haptic navigation company and platform company, right? And so I left WearWorks and stepped in to KCAI as the Leonard Pryor Fellow, visiting for accessibility. Now, what that means is as the Leonard Pryor Fellow at KCAI, I am charged with creating conversations around awareness, mainly with accessibility, talking with faculty, students, and connecting with the greater KC area to spread the word of accessibility and all its implications, and to act as a resource for people on campus in particular who are interested in exploring the space of accessibility but don't know where to start. That's me. I used to have hair. It's gone. Right now, I have a nice, crazy schedule. I won't dig into this too much. I think the big thing that is important and I'd like to talk about is Tactility, which is an exhibition. I think I have a slide in here that I'll chat about it with, right? So, designing for the sense of touch. So this is the real reason. This is how I left New York. This is how they got me out of New York to come to Kansas City. They let me teach a class that I wanted to teach, and I realized a really big opportunity, challenge, if we became the billion-dollar haptic company that I was telling all of our investors we would become, where would I go and hire haptic designers from? Now, there's no direct degree in haptics. We do have human-computer interaction, right? Usually offered at the master's and PhD level. Not too many programs offer a specialization in haptics from an undergraduate point of view. But meanwhile, like, I learned the word haptic at 33, and I changed my whole career. I learned the word artist at 6. That's how I became an artist. I learned the word engineer at 12. That's how I became an engineer, and haptics was at 33. So I came here with the opportunity to teach a class and to share the wealth of haptic information to non-technical students in particular. Because when you put the technology into the hands of the people, they find use for it, ultimately it grows and it evolves. And that was my whole point. I'm teaching a class called Superpowered Products. This is really about looking at the future of design based off of speculative fiction, AKA anime, superheroes, comic books, and video games. Yeah, no one has a problem doing my homework, right? The big thing here is if you think about what we did with Wayband, we just did 1% of what Daredevil can do on a sick day, right? You know, like, if you look at the pages of Marvel, of DC, of Top Cow, right, you have innovation for the next century, and guess what? You can't patent fiction, right? I mean, you can patent fiction, right? I mean, you make the real thing, right? But most of those things, you know, they're not patented. So you can tag into the collective consciousness that we all have agreed on, the powers that we want, and you can bring those powers to real people in real life. So they picked a customer, they picked a superpower, and they distilled that power into some kind of form of reality, a proxy, as I call it. Now, there was an exhibition. I won't go too much into that. It's over, but it was cool and fun. All about the 5 senses, or the 3 senses in my case. And then now, tactility. I want to talk about this one. At the Janus Library at KCAI, I will be hosting an exhibition opening on 5/17. The whole point of this exhibition is to have people submit work of arts that were meant to be touched. I realized that coming here, one of the challenges from an accessibility point of view in the art community was the look but don't touch narrative that is too common and familiar in the exhibition of artwork. So this was a conversation or an opportunity to shift that conversation a bit and to explore it, and to give students an opportunity to place with form, right? Now, what am I doing? This is like my fun stuff right here. The Haptic 9. Building the 9 bridges to a ubiquitous haptic future. What are the 9 bridges? You don't really care, right? But they're right here. You can take a look at them. Ultimately, you know, in order to build the world, you have to build it in pieces. Recognizing that I'm building a company to focus on building the bridges that are necessary to make haptics as ubiquitous and accessible as designing for a sense of touch, right? You know, why can anyone be a musician? Because everyone has like speakers and microphones in their pocket, right? Once that level of access is available to everyone else from a haptics point of view, I believe that there's going to be a prolific change in the status quo of what we have from a content point of view. Ubiquitous means affordable, accessible, and approachable. The approachable part is important because we're humans, and like if humans get scared, they won't touch stuff. So we really need to make it approachable. And one of the ways to make things approachable is to start with impossible. You know, it's you know, like no one cared about a hoverboard until we saw Back to the Future 2. And then because of Back to the Future 2, it had to be done. And not only did it have to be done, it had to be done by when? 2015. Thank you, somebody. Oh my God. Right? You know what I'm saying? I've always had a dream. I saw The Matrix 1,000 times, and I wanted to build a suit that would allow a person to download Kung Fu, and the suit would teach them using vibrations. Actually, that's how I got into blind navigation. I just figured there wasn't a market for downloading Kung Fu suits, and maybe navigation would be more useful to people. I was deeply inspired. I won't go into the movie at the moment. But here's what I realized. Movement is still learned in the way that music was listened to before the invention of the phonograph. Right? What if movement learners were given digital powers? Right? Thought about that. Thinking about the music industry, right? What if you had to like go to Beyonce's house to like hear Beyonce? I mean, you probably like that, right? She might not. Now, the other part of that conversation is movement is still taught in the way that music was shared before the invention of the phonograph, right? What if movement teachers were given digital powers, right? And we see this, right? You know, like in language, we have the proxy where the written languages versus the languages that aren't written, right? And the preservation that happens in one versus the other. Movement has been hard to verbalize, to identify movements with just words, even with just images, right? That's always been the challenge of communicating movement. So movement teachers have had to teach and find dedicated students to spend years and learn, right? But if anyone breaks the movement chain, guess what? The movement is lost. And there are plenty of movements that are being lost. So I had an exhibition called The Invisible Hand that was exploring the idea of haptics and movement learning as a combination to enable people to explore movement in a new way, but also more importantly to preserve movement, because movement is a big part of our culture, just like art, just like music. Like dance movements are at the core of human rituals and experiences, and we don't prioritize them in the same way we do our medias that can be digitized and stored. And now we have the opportunity to do that with movement. So a simple note on accessibility, because it's super important, because we're here, is the brush tool, right? This is like my favorite accessibility example from Adobe. You know, I'm not sure how many of you use Photoshop. We're in a design week. I'm assuring everybody, right? But, you know, like, there's a billion different ways to access the brush tool, right? You can type B, you can go to the menu and pull it down. You got the hover thing, you got the, like 6 or 7 different ways. And I used to wonder, why was Adobe spending all of my money for this expensive program to like add new ways to, you know, press the button B? And then I realized it's because different people see information and understand information in different ways. Some of us creators are very visual. Some of us are hyperlogical. Right? Some of us need like that button right in front of your face floating on the window, like so you can constantly see it. Accessibility is really about creating multiple points of access for the same experience so that people can buy into it the way that they choose to, not the way that you do. So one piece of unsolicited advice, make it accessible. Oh, can you hear me? Make it accessible, right? And again, bring whatever accessibility you can with you. Like, accessibility is a big conversation that never ends. So start where you can, do what you can, and just be prepared to get better. Now, you want to lend me a hand? I'm doing some interviews, I'm doing some prototyping, and looking for some fundraising. Reach out to me, I'm happy to chat. And thank you so much.
I just keep thinking about, if you need a volunteer who can't dance, I'm here. Both volunteer. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Next up, please, Bianca Zardazava.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I think I want to take the approach coming up here, sharing with everybody who's spoken before, is the approach of looking at accessibility and UX from my perspective as, honestly, a kid from Mizoram, India, who lived in Taiwan, ended up in Kansas City, is now part of designing for a healthcare agency. And the opportunity to speak up here is honestly something that I really, really am thankful for. I'm grateful for it. And so I wanted to go about this with usually what I share with high schoolers and with middle schoolers, because for me, design was something that was inspired to me early on by mentors and teachers. And I think that every one of us here can think of somebody who guided them towards that journey and that path. And as we're speaking about accessibility, I want to talk about how when we view doing something new in UX, how do we view that stage that we're at? Do we come with it with heuristics, background, or already understandings that we might already have? Are we ready to learn? So for myself is, I grew up in Taiwan. I moved to Missouri in 2006, proud American now. Worked for several nonprofit organizations, just kind of working as a graphic designer and a freelancer for that time. And like many of you, I'm sure, coming from graphic design and stepping into UX, I felt lost, but had a lot of good mentors and teachers and opportunities to go from there. Looking at the journey as a third cultured person, somebody who's got multiple cultures locked in and speaking different languages, I was always very interested in how we communicate and how we look at the tools that we design or make for other people to use. And in that context, in that capacity, how do we then continue to help other people outside of just abled people to do that? I'm a dad. I love video games. I'm obsessed with, HUD design. I'm a toy collector who loves toy packaging and started with designing from there. And I always love asking, why? So the way I think about life, a lot of times help me simplify with UX, especially when I do get to speak with a room of, designers and people who have been doing this for a lot longer than me, is to start at level 1, to try to set zero assumptions, to, I know that our history and experience dictates a lot of what we think is right or wrong, and that can also mislead us in our own designs and direction. Starting at level 1 helps us become students, and that's something I always want to share and always want to be, is that when I walk into a room, no matter the project, no matter the conversation, that I'm stepping in at level 1, trying to be a student, trying to learn. It positions my brain to learn, cushions my ego. I don't want to be able to not hear somebody for the perspective, and I want to be teachable. I really want to be teachable. I want to be malleable. I want anybody that I meet and encounter to be able to teach me something new that I can take with me. And I want to allow myself to always become a teacher. And if you're a teacher, you're always teaching what you learned. So I get imposter syndrome. I'm not going to lie. That's a big thing. So one thing I always do is, hey, I started in a brand new country at level 1. I can do that in any room, in any space, any situation. So with that said, is when the team asked me to speak on accessibility, the truth of it is that I needed to find more experienced people. I needed to allow anyone within that space that is differently abled than myself to teach me their experience. Design is nuanced, and there's so we can find a lot of people in different spaces who meet those needs. I've had great mentors during that time. I don't come to this field traditionally. I'll be honest, I'm a Bible college student dropout. So I'm very, very humbled to be able to speak up here and share with my peers, especially in Kansas City. I'll eventually find other people who are better than me, continue to teach me for that. And once again, is the theme of my life and design and how I approach these things, especially with accessibility right now, is that I'm going to start at level 1. Accessibility is new to me. It's my new level 1, and I'm excited about it. It's a brand new journey, brand new quest, brand new storyline. But I want to read more, I want to watch more, I want to practice more. These past week, I got to meet Keith and Libby and Tom, and just what they do in the world of accessibility continues to push me in my own tiny corner of Kansas City and what I do with my team, pushing them to see how we continue to design and encourage each other to be curious, to continue to allow ourselves to say, I don't know enough, I want to learn more. I know that design and showcase and improve, it's terrifying for me, but I need to show it more to other people. I need other people to tell me what I'm missing and what I don't see. And of course, kill your darlings, kill your designs. All of us know that. If you work with a team, anybody who doesn't understand what you're trying to communicate, you get used to it, but not really. So I have definitely my, keep your receipts, Accessibility does not hinder creativity. If we design for those in our communities and our users who have the least, I don't want to say that, excuse the term. For those of us who are differently abled, then that is something that every one of us can also utilize. And I think that one of the conversations we just had on the side was we tend to pity, we tend to feel bad about others with different abilities. Even when we get temporary disabilities, we see that in ourselves and we get scared about it. And I think it's important for that conversation to push us to be better designers, to push us to have those conversations with people who might be product managers or team leaders or stakeholders who find no need for those conversations. But those are the inches that we need to fight for, because we can compound accessibility as a team, as a people group, as humanity. Thinking about just basic things like forms, hover, heavy layout, there's lots of little ways that we can, and a way for me is win those little battles of accessibility for other people in my own little space. Speak up for accessibility. I am, like I said again, my story as being an immigrant to this country, moving to Kansas City with my family. There's just different perspectives that who you are in your story allows you to be curious for other people, curious for what they see, curious for their experience. And allowing, the daily pain points in your life to kind of drive how you pour into your project, pour into your product, pour into your design. So remember to start at level 1. And yeah, I'm excited to do that and happy to share with you all on this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Libby Eddings.
Hi, everybody. I am a nervous presenter, so when I flub my words, don't be surprised. I am a 5 foot 8 inch tall sci-fi nerd, ape descendant with a blonde mohawk, bad eyesight, and a brain that doesn't let me always do what I want to do. I've worked in various forms of design for about 15 years, whether that be physical design with, lost the words, apologies, footwear, thank you. I did footwear, I have done big rig truck interiors, their sleeping compartments, and then transitioned into digital, and am now almost solely focused on accessibility and inclusivity. I am genuinely hopeful for a future where everyone can access what they need to access, whether that be services, whether that be information, in whatever way they are able to, need to, or find comfortable. So, have you ever, in whatever way you are comfortable with, whether that be in your head, raise your hand, kick the person in front of you if they're willing, I guess. Have you ever tried to carry in all of the groceries at the same time and either not been able to open the door or been really thankful for lever door handles? Have you ever used a curb cut or a ramp when pushing a stroller, pulling a suitcase, dragging a dresser into a house? Take your pick. Adjusted your seat in a car to be able to reach all the controls. Listened to an audiobook. Turned on the captions on your phone or on the TV so that you can either watch something without sound or watch the TV while your kids or other people in the room are being loud. Congratulations, you've all used an innovation that was originally developed to help someone that had a disability. The next thing I will say is that disability, not a bad word. You can use the word. So next I'm going to talk about the disability spectrum. There is a lot of words on here. I am not going to read them all. So what is the disability spectrum? When I talk about things like innovations that we've all used, that's part of designing for the disability spectrum. There are temporary disabilities, things like broken arms, just being sick, having an ear infection and you can't hear, having laryngitis, not being able to speak, etc. Or like me, you can't see past, I don't know, the third row, despite my awesome glasses. There are situational disabilities. You're carrying all the groceries inside. You're carrying a baby. You're, I don't know, you have all the shopping and you need to leave the mall or enter the mall. All of those things are things that can be designed for and can be designed for by designing for people with disabilities. Like, we are often told as designers to design for the 80% and accommodate the 20%, right? I actually would like to flip that because the innovation is really in designing for that 20% and optimizing it for the 80. So I have to apologize for this slide if anybody in the room had a hand in designing this app. I was sent this app as part of coordination for this event, and I've already apologized to the person that sent it to me. The reason that I put this up here is because the contrasts for this application is meant to be used as a calendar for multiple participants, right? To see where the heat map is of availability. None of those colors meet color contrast. I pulled this up on my phone outside. Now, I admit that I have bad eyes. I couldn't see the colors, so I didn't respond at first. I was the third one that responded. As you can tell by the responders 3 over there, that's because I hadn't responded yet, partly because I couldn't see it, and partly because I needed to pull it up on my giant monitor so that I could see it right next to my calendar and respond appropriately. The second bit about this application that really got me is when you go to add your availability. So I came in as the fourth person, apologies. I wanted to be the flexible one, right? I wanted to say, I can't even read what that is. Wednesday at 3:30, I believe, is the one that everybody had available. I wanted to be the flexible one, provide my availability at that time to make sure that we could all meet. When I click add availability, that whole screen blanks out. So the cognitive load of remembering what that time was did not happen. I had to do the whole thing twice. Now, one way that we could look at this, instead of complaining about it, which is exactly what I just did for the last 5 minutes, is if you had looked at this design through a lens of disability, through a lens of inclusion, and said, hey, this may be used by Justin out on a soccer field while his kids play, are they going to be able to see these colors? Is this going to make sense? Are there alternate workflows, like wanting to be the flexible one when you add your availability, that maybe they want to click the heat map and add their availability that way? What are other flexible ways, as some of my other colleagues had said, what other flexible ways can you add in so that there are different ways to access that information or complete that workflow? So in summary, life and disability are a spectrum. Design for that spectrum. Evaluate your designs through lenses of disability and inclusion. That can be a wide variety of things. It's a big amorphous ball that a lot of people are too scared to even touch, and that's okay. Baby steps are still steps. If you don't know where to start, again, don't panic, it's okay. Start somewhere. Keep moving forward. Accept that you'll get it wrong. We all fail. That's how we learn. And if you really don't know and you want to get it right, ask for help. That's it. Frank, back to you.
If anybody has suggestions of new when we can meet apps, you all have my email. That was fantastic. Thank you, everybody. I think we're going to move on to a question and answer kind of conversational flow. So speakers, everyone, please come on back up. Turn it over to you guys. Thank you very much.
Let's not actually break legs, Frank.
You all have faces, wow.
If you want to take some questions, I'll come around with a microphone. We're live streaming and recording, so we want to get the audio of your questions. All right.
I'm just curious, when you're dealing with competing timelines and working within roadmaps and trying to ship product, how do you communicate the value of adding in accessibility and explain it from a viability standpoint to your business stakeholders?
I'll go unless you want to. You sure? All right. There are multiple ways that you can approach that question. What was the word that you used? Viability?
Yeah.
The snarky answer is, do you want to get sued? Because it's less a matter of if and more a matter of when. Again, that's the snarky answer. The secondary answer is, who are your users? And are you aware that your users, most likely, there's 15 to 20% of them that you have no idea have a disability. Not only because disabilities can be invisible, but also because a lot of people don't declare them, especially within the workplace. So if you're building, I don't know what you're building, but if you're building tools for a workplace, if you're building, I have no idea, whatever it is, there will be people that use that tool or service or whatever that require accessibility. Additionally, find the other supporters of accessibility within your organization. Build that group of people that you can use as allies. One of the sneaky ways that I tend to get things done is, I call it pulling strings. So you get the ear of another person who also supports similar things. You mention it to them. You mention it to this person. You mention it to the person who has the ear of the difficult person that you need to get to. That's how you get things done.
All right, any other questions? Yes.
Is the term accessibility like solely reserved for people with disabilities, or is it a broader term for making things easy to understand, be it like presentations or event design, those types of things? Is it solely just for people with disabilities?
So I think that, and I'm going to answer this from a non-political point of view. No, I come from a city called Camden, New Jersey. For most of my life, we were the fifth poorest city in America. So then you have like cost and economic accessibility as well, which can be just as much of a barrier as any physical disability, right? So I like to think that accessibility really is about looking at it from the point of view of the human experience and trying to gauge what types of things a human in multiple scenarios and multiple mind states and multiple ability states might have. Like, I was coming here to this talk, and thankfully, someone put together a calendar invite that had the Google Calendar of exactly where, Linda Hall is, because I'd never been here before. Usually, I go to a talk and that information is missing. So then I have to go through an email while driving, trying to find a place that I don't know where I'm going while being nervous about a talk that I'm giving. Like, you see, like, the compounding of possible challenges that simply putting, being thoughtful and being like, okay, what is an easy way to give everyone the best experience in this particular space? And so I like to believe that accessibility really is about considering as many different parts of that pie as you can. Now, you can't include everything, right? So you fit in what you can, but I think that, like, you think about as much as you can, and then you make the trade-offs based off of what you feel is important to you and your users.
Well said.
All right, let me just give a shout out to our online viewers too. If you have questions, type them in the Q&A chat box. I've got a colleague who will feed the questions to me. So any in-person, in-house questions? Oh, okay, hang on, I'll come around.
Thank you. Do any of you find that you have any unique tools, resources, or methodologies you found you end up relying on when you design products specifically for folks with disabilities?
Well, I'll start as the public infrastructure guy, no tools come to mind. Actually, I'm sitting up here asking myself, why are we in the public infrastructure space not as sophisticated, or why are we not leveraging the expertise in sort of the UX space, right, that these folks can bring to products? Why don't we bring the same intentionality on the front end of the stuff that we build, that people use, with folks that extend the experience and the feedback beyond traditional, right, public works engineers. Nothing against them, but right, we're building to a manual, and so we could. So we don't. I'm really intrigued about this idea of cross-pollinating the sort of UX experience from the private sector or innovation space, and how do we link that to public-facing process and assets to be more intentional? So I wish we had more tools on the public side. Folks are, have a long to-do list and typically don't like to I don't want to say overcomplicate, but further complicate the process. But clearly there's value on the front end of doing these things, particularly things that we're building that have a 50+ year useful life, right? Thinking more intentionally about how people use them, about how we optimize their experience and improve it, right, is a huge return on that time. So it's a question I'm asking myself. But how about you guys? Tools?
Honestly, finding specific users that are willing to work with us and use those. Working with in the healthcare agency with a lot of people with different background, or there's number one is Figma's got great plugins, and there's other tools out there. But, ask yourself too, like, you usually care for people you are interacting with. You know their stories better, their struggles better, even on a socioeconomic level. What devices can they use, and how does your, design fit into those? If we intentionally as designers or human beings are are interacting with people with disability, people of different, social status, or just different position than us, then we're always thinking about those people, And for me for our team, we try really hard to really get our stakeholders to let us, have those conversations with different team members and ask them, do you have a member of the team who might not use the mouse at all? Or, or do you have team members who are constantly driving around with, a basic lower end iPhone or whatever it is? But if you can think of those people, to me, that's the greatest tool. Like, I don't want to overuse that term empathy, but if you can think of those people, you're going to design for them. It's going to naturally flow out of you. And that has been the most powerful tool for me. But of course, talking to people who do this a lot, who have a heart and a passion for it. My friends who are, signers, who are deaf, who are codas, that's been a huge step in for me understanding a little bit more of what, design or interaction with the digital world would look like. So that's a very long way of saying, like, let's expand our circle of people we know. Let's go out of our way to meet people like that and learn from this experience.
Yes.
So my question is to those of you who are actually designing with computers and rigorous use of a computer. In terms of a laptop item, what do you use to facilitate the mouse? Now, I find I ignite carpal tunnel using the Mac pad and the Mac mouse. So I usually try and do it external, which is challenging in all sorts of different ways, etc. I also use the Wacom pen tablet when I can. But I want to know, for those that are really rigorously using computers, what you do to prevent your own disability from occurring overuse.
I can't speak from a design perspective as far as designing with a computer. I do that all the time, but you can use voice control, and that may ease up some of your strain and allow you that extra leeway so that you can use the trackpad when you have to. Does that make sense?
Is that something that is an additional program, or is that something that I know Adobe has a lot of different features now, but that you could work within it and say, move this 2 inches to the right or draw a circle, or, I mean.
I believe it's an additional program.
Okay.
I would have to look that up. As Bianca says, it's okay to say I don't know.
I know that when New York City was originally came into being, they basically copied London, and I know Birmingham, when it came into being, they basically copied Chicago. So back and forth. My question is mainly, since everybody's kind of copying each other and seeing what works and what doesn't work, was there a specific transit that you picked, like, this is working really well, we should copy that, or change that, or add to that?
So there's a lot of really good examples, and there's even more really bad examples. This is one of those areas where, we're 50 years late to the game, right? Or 80 years in building out a robust transit system actually worked to our advantage, because we had seen a lot of modernization in the fleet and the design standards, even in the federal requirements. So actually, we actually piggybacked. What drove the decision, what oftentimes drives the decision about things like platform interface, is the vehicles, because there's only so many manufacturers, and because there's design challenges with them. What we see is Europe is significantly more progressive in their accessibility standards and their fleet interfaces. They have a lot of legacy systems, like the picture I showed, that are bad, but they're modernizing at a rapid rate, and they have significantly more properties that are investing in significant expansion. So we see fleet modernization and platform modernization there at a much faster pace. The U.S. and the domestic marketplace is smaller in the grand scheme of the industry, and has been much more slow to adapt. So our vehicle is a CAF manufactured vehicle, actually out of Spain. Zaragoza, Spain, but they have a domestic manufacturing plant in Monterey, New York. And it just so happened, when we were building the downtown streetcar line, that Cincinnati, of all places, had procured this 100% low floor vehicle, the first of its kind in North America. They had options that we could piggyback on their contract, save ourselves time and money to move ours faster, and we were able to do that with the benefits. The other thing that we were able to do with so that's 100% low floor, and then our platform design, if you guys are familiar, I mentioned have these tapered ends, and that not only provides access down to the sidewalk on both sides, but there's a lower elevation, a sort of a secondary platform that we've built into the design, so buses can use them also if need be. And so just sort of an integration of modes. So I like to say we're building this thing uniquely Kansas City. It's we've used a lot of bad examples. We were really fortunate the fleet choice that we had to sort of our disposal in 2016 that allowed us to have 100% low floor. And just so you guys know, most of the vehicles, like buses and rail vehicles, there's steps on those vehicles because there's axles that connect the steel wheels. Well, our vehicle doesn't have axles. It's an axleless U-frame truck where the truck is literally cut out from the middle, so there's no axles. The wheels are on the outside of the truck frame, and so it's shaped like a U that allows the floor to be lower in the middle, inside the car, allowing there to be no steps on board the car. So it's a much more modern design that requires more sophistication on all the equipment that goes into the technology. And we see a lot of talk about the advantages of ADA and federal regulation on accessibility standards. We see it on the other side where crashworthiness and other federal requirements that impede our progress to modernize fleets and to take innovations, because the bureaucracy that controls what's allowable in the U.S. is really complicated. And so it's one of the reasons why our vehicle manufacturers are really slow to adapt, because the rules that they have to play by in the U.S. are different, and we can't just take a European model that's been proven to work really, really well and just use it here. So so Cincinnati, believe it or not, was the long answer to your question, was an entity that was sort of front and center that we built our model on. Route is different. I would also just say this: the vehicles are one aspect of usability. I think the definition of accessibility that we talked about, I really appreciated, because it was, how do we make it easy to use, right? We can use a lot of semantics about accessibility and how we define. At the end of the day, the philosophy, and that's everything from routing, bi-directional on one street with really simplistic, right, icons and graphics and information. How do we simplify the execution of this and make it super easy to use? And so, again, places that have done that well and places that haven't, and we're sort of, I would say, setting a new standard domestically for sort of ease of use and accessibility with the big A.
All right. Oh, did someone want to comment? Okay. We have a question from an online viewer. First of all, thanks for tuning in. The question is, because disabilities are so often undisclosed, how do you find people to interview or gather information from?
There are multiple groups to do user research with that you can that specifically gather people with disabilities. I can't remember them off the top of my head at the moment. However, if whoever that is finds me on LinkedIn, I will find it for you and get it to you. I lost it.
Okay.
I lost the words.
Okay, I can jump in a bit. And
Okay.
so, I work with people who are blind or visually impaired. A lot of times people who are blind or visually impaired, what they'll do is they'll think that they have better sight than they do, so that they're just not externally evaluated for their vision loss, or judged or pickpocketed, right? Like walking with your phone, you have a blind cane, it's like, just take your phone out of your hand. And that's actually a big part of the challenge. So I feel like, one of the ways to do it is looking at different, because almost every disability group has an advocacy group that like fights for their rights. You know what I'm saying? Like, just has been a necessary thing for, like everyone to get rights in America, especially in America, that's how we do, right? So, Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation, like National Federation of the Blind, I'm on the board for the Perkins School for the Blind. So in blind world, there's some places that you could definitely go. And I think that starting with like your kind of like local Lighthouse Guild, Helen Keller Center or National Federation chapter is a really good call. If you're working outside of the blindness space, of course, I feel like almost every group has a group that's active somewhere nearby, and most of them, if you just reach out to them and discuss, I think one of the things that often happens in the space, and just to kind of be for fair warning and just acknowledgement, is that oftentimes people reach out to disabilities in a manner that's kind of like, you should be grateful that I'm including your conversation and like your abilities in my product so that you can have something, instead of offering compensation for time and research. And so, that's actually been a big challenge in the disability space as well. But I think once those pieces even out, most people are usually really happy to participate when they realize that someone is, authentically and uniquely building something for them or, their community.
An additional note that I remembered after you started talking. If you're really looking for those hidden disabilities, one way to do that is to instead of asking what their disability may be, instead ask what features they use. Do you use the Control Plus on your keyboard to zoom in your screen? Do you turn up the contrast? Do you make the font bigger? Do you use captions? Things like that is another way to get at what you're trying to get at without asking or indicating to them that they do have a disability. Because there is that internalized ableism that people don't want to, as we age, we more often than not will have some version of a disability. And that's sometimes hard to accept.
I'll just say, and we're a physical system running through neighborhoods, and so maybe it's easier in some sense for us because we know who we're connecting, who lives there, who's been watching what we're building. And it's really phenomenal. One of the pictures I shared was of some of the testing. Mike Friedholm, he wouldn't mind me sharing his name, was disabled in a wheelchair, had a dog as an aid, and he was incredibly appreciative of the opportunity to provide some early feedback for us in the process. And actually for us, not just hearing his response to what we were doing, but the feedback that he was providing and then connecting us to other folks in the community to do the same was super powerful. I mean, I said we thought we knew the benefits of what we were working on until we didn't until we really kind of witnessed the experience from folks who are going to benefit. And the impacts of that it's one of the best days in my 10 years at work was getting to see and sort of hear from folks on the stuff that was working well. There's always in this space, the other piece of it is it's like you're never done, right? There's always, and there's also a lot of debate even within the individual communities that we've engaged about what the right answer is, right? Like they themselves, there's not unanimity in sort of the perspective. It's trying to understand what the goal is and hearing from folks. And but definitely, if you have an opportunity to find individuals that are connected to the cause in one way or another, geographically or service perspective, we found they've been very, very willing to help us try to make it the best it can be, for sure.
Right, you had a question up here, right?
Hi. How often do you use AI to conceptualize like accessibility solutions or just to help you work more efficiently? Like just for anything, even for your daily life?
Yeah, I must say I can speak to this one a bit. So I use AI quite a bit. I'm teaching artists how to code, which is its own unique set of challenges, because it's like you don't have the physics background and all the other pieces that, heavy math that you build coding off of. So one of the things that I've been recommending with my students to do is to use ChatGPT to support them in teaching them how to code better. Because I don't have the time to spend with each student. So I'm like, hey, put that code in chat and tell chat to explain that to you in a way that a novice coder who's just learning can understand, and have them rewrite it. And so I'll use it as a teaching aid to get things done. And for me, what it's doing is it's multiplying my time because everybody's coding a totally different project. So if I'm working with you, I actually don't have the mental energy or attention to work with anyone else. So for me, what I'm using it for is to kind of expand my students' ability to self-educate. Because ultimately, it's as their teacher, my goal is not to teach them. My goal is to show them how to learn, so they can teach themselves. And so I feel that I welcome those tools in. I'm like, hey, cool. You built that template? Oh, cool. You didn't get that slide from a template? Why are you building? This is not presentation building class. There is presentation building class. This is not it though, right? Use the tools that are available. Get the job done in effective and efficiency. And I feel like AI is a fantastic tool for students for that.
All right, we have another online question. Is there a different process when creating a design for someone that was born with a disability versus someone that developed a disability later in life?
I'll try to go first. I would say that the feedback that you're going to get from those two individuals will be different. Someone who has multiple decades of experience with their disability is going to have a different set of needs and a different, lost the words, a different take on their disability than someone who went blind, for example, later in life. Someone who went blind later in life, for example, may find more descriptive alt text valuable versus someone who's been blind from an early age. They may not. But again, it's very individual and it depends on the person.
Yeah, I'm about to say, we actually met our developer who built the Wayband app. He is visually impaired. He lives in right outside of Detroit, and he had reached out to us because he was like, "Hey, I'm blind and visually impaired, and your website is inaccessible." We were selling products to people who were blind. I was like, "Oops," and then it was like, "Well, let's talk about it, right?" And then like he kept showing up for meetings, and after a month, I just hired him, and he ran my development team, like my remote teams in both Romania and India, and brought the app, from concept to the App Store in 2 years. And so one of the things that Jim would always say is he would say, like, if you met one blind person, you met one blind person. Right? Because like what he can see in his experience of blindness is totally different than even someone sitting next to him who might have gone blind in the same age, right? And then you also have the people who, again, don't have so much of the visual references. So I think that like the big part of it is that there is no blind experience, just like there's no black experience or no male experience, right? Like we're all walking in with like a completely different experience, but getting enough data points from the community and people in their varying ways, I think is often, because again, it's like we've gotten to spaces where we were trying to design a product and like one person didn't like this one feature and we were like redesigning the whole thing, and it was like we had to learn that like, no, you can't change the whole app every single time one person has a challenge. That doesn't mean every single person who's blind had that same challenge. And we really built, because otherwise you'll spin your wheels crazy. So like we had to build a check and balance system. It was like, okay, let's check in with the rest of the community. Is this need a valid need across the entire spectrum of what we're dealing with? If the answer is yes, then we change directions, right? But if the answer is no, then we ask more questions.
Or is there another way to build that separate experience to where the person who needed that separate feature or wanted it to be different can still access that?
And like I think a really interesting conversation is that like right now we're using the word accessibility, but like what we're really just saying is personalization. Mm-hmm. It's like, most of the time like my phone screen is in black and white because I don't like the red notifications, right? You know what I'm saying? That's an accessibility feature for contrast, right? So what we're really saying is that, hey, your thing should work for you, should work for you, should work for you, should work for you, and work for you, regardless of where you are, what your ability is, blah, 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 right? And that's kind of like the big point.
It's a swap from build one thing for everyone to build an experience that everyone can personalize.
I just want to add to that, like when we were going through this process with our own products, we quickly figured out that if we only asked one person and treated it like we were checking something off, what a horrible way of viewing people and how they interact with our product or with the world. The personalization it's something every human being should have an opportunity at equally, and not something that has to be set aside for them. That causes, the kind of this ostracization. Yeah, it causes ostracization where we separate them from the experience that everybody should have. But I think it is hard. I think it is difficult. But I think that once again is where when we ask to speak to somebody about their disabilities or see how they interact with our products or the things we design, I think, again, is going to those sources who are wanting to interact with you, like those advocates. But also when you know somebody or somebody in an organization, are you a designer or are you a team that advocates for accessibility all the time? Is it an actual pattern in your life? Is it an actual thing you want? Or is it just a one-off thing that you have to check off to feel good about the final product? And I think we should put it into, our basic foundation of how we move ahead in design and how we view the world and how we build for other people.
Yeah, at one point, design was the Band-Aid that we put onto engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Remember back in the day? Right? Back in the 50s? In the Buckminster Fuller day, right? And the Charles and Ray Eames, right? They had to advocate for design as necessary at the front end. And we saw what happened when we put design at the front end, right? We created companies that have $3 trillion valuations. Right? And this is the same thing. This is actually even huger than that. Because right now what you're seeing is a ridiculously huge sum of people, 20% of the world's population. This is over 1 billion people. Right? You know what I'm saying? Who have been traditionally underserved. Guess what that sounds like? A market opportunity. If I never saw one, right? If you come in with a product, VR headsets, right? Quest 2 right now costs $199. Braille keyboard, $2,700. Why? Because we spent more money on research figuring out how to make VR headsets cheaper. No offense, we saw a bigger opportunity for people to use VR headsets, right? As a humanity, right? And people back that vision, literally, with dollars. And that's how we got VR headsets, right? So where we put our time, where we put our dollars, where we put our spending, that's what moves forward. Mm-hmm. Bose, there's this great example of Amar Bose, the founder of Bose Sound. He spent $50 million in 15 years developing noise canceling. At one point, his person was running the group at the time, walked in and told him these stats. And he said, wow, if I was the CEO of a publicly traded company, I would have been fired years ago. Right? Because, he saw what the investment, and what do we know Bose for? Noise canceling. Mm-hmm. Right? Now everything has noise canceling. You know why? Because Bose's patent expired. Yeah. Right? You know what I'm saying? So now the whole world has noise canceling because one person sat on a plane and thought that sound waves might be able to cancel each other out if you played them together and spent $50 million in 15 years to do it. So I feel from the point of view of, how do we get accessibility to that space? Accessibility is like design. And once we start leading forward with it, 89% of people who watch Netflix use closed captions. 89% of people who watch Netflix aren't deaf, right? We're already there, and as we add these little pieces in, I think that we're going to see a transformational shift in not only the types of people that come to products and the way that those products can serve them, but the millionaires that are going to be made in the process by serving those needs that have been so underserved for such a long period of time.
All right, additional questions? Yes.
I was just wondering if you guys could speak a little bit to your career journeys that got you here to accessibility. Like UX, almost nobody in here has a design UX degree. So none of us also have an accessibility design degree. So how did you get here to the roles you're currently in?
Yeah, you want to go first?
I filled out a bunch of applications. And prayed somebody was okay taking in a really weird name. Honestly, I think it started when I started making friends who were signers for deaf users, and that's visually maybe something different. But for myself, I just kind of looked at my story and just who I am, and this once again, I always kind of say this, start at level 1, And it just started popping up, kept coming up, and then people started asking me, like, did you design this with enough contrast in it? Can anybody who's, visually impaired, can they look at what you're designing, what you're doing? And so from that point on, it was just kind of a hunger and a curiosity for it. I think when you start noticing something in your own experience that you don't have and somebody has, I'm sorry, but I think if you're a good designer, if you're a good UX, you should be asking, like, wow, what does that look like? And how do I get to a point where I'm curious about it? Because I think curiosity is going to drive this. Every single one of us in here, myself included, needs to be curious. We're not in this field. We're not in this field because we're not curious. We're curious. We're constantly looking for that. And so, a lot of education is now coming from these three. I'm very honored to be sitting up here. I don't think I should be, but I've learned so much in that experience. And so I think, in short, in my space, I know where I work at right now, because it's the medical world, it's easy to kind of think about that. Though we mostly work with administration, it does start causing us to think about, like, where do those individuals who might not even say that they have disabilities, how do they operate with our tools? So I think, so in short is, if you're in UX, you're in accessibility. You're already in it. Everybody, hooray, we're in it, and there's great resources out there, and if there's not, let's go get it. Let's go find it. Let's go make it, and let's share that with everyone. So I'm sick of that. Let's be the boast of our industry. Yeah.
Love it. I raised my hand. Is the funny short answer. I went to school for industrial design at KU, and then I've had a lot of touch points throughout my life with people with disabilities, and I've always been curious. And to go back to what Bianca said, like, you just have to be curious. You just have to ask with the intention of learning. And then I had two kids who are amazingly wonderful and very neurodiverse, and that kind of gave me an additional nudge. And then I have a very, very dear friend who is blind, and that gave me an additional nudge. And I also get to work with her every day, and it's amazing. Which, by the way, if you don't already encourage employment of people with disabilities, please do so, because they are a fountain of knowledge. Again, one person is one person's experience, but man, I cannot tell you the amount of things that I have learned simply by asking what the best way is to do X with this person. How's the best way to contact you? Is Slack accessible for you? Is email accessible for you? What's the best way to get to you and get an answer? Meeting people where they're at. That's I got way off track, but anyway, that's how I ended up here. And then we had an accessibility project at work, and I raised my hand and jumped up and down and said, yes, please, and took a whole bunch of training.
So for me, it's interesting. I don't, typically think of myself as a designer. I thought I wanted to be an architect as like 7th grade on. I went to school, undergrad, to become an architect. After my freshman year, I said, well, what about all this stuff? Building stuff is neat. Looking at the 5-year program, and I'm thinking, what about the context of the building? What about the neighborhood? What about and so I ended up getting an undergrad in community and regional planning, and started working with small communities on, long-range planning and what are we doing to build cities, and went back and got my MBA while I was doing that, and continued in the planning space. And then I saw how much money we spend on transportation specifically, and how many of the things that we actually undermine the goals that we say we're trying to achieve. And so I came to Kansas City 20 years ago, almost, to lead a conversation around regional transportation investment in land use, and what are we doing as a region to build the sustainable place that's more than just moving cars, and how can we redeploy transportation resources to get at a multitude of outcomes from public health to accessibility to economic development to bringing people and jobs back to the core of our city. And I started was the project manager on the starter line streetcar back on the planning of it back in 2010, and we spun off an organization to figure out how to start it up and operate it, and now how to grow it. And so I've been doing that for 10 years, and now it's how do we scale, and how do we maximize the value and impact, and how do we roll in lessons learned from things that we could have done better, and how do we continue to tell a story about how we think about these public spaces and these public investments in an integrated way that's not just, let's build a road or an infrastructure to just move people. How are we achieving outcomes that are going to make our city more healthy, vibrant, and connected for the next decade or for the next generation? So that's my story.
Awesome. So this streetcar was like 20 years in the making for you, huh?
Yeah, but sure.
My journey was a bit windy. I started as a kid, I could draw really good. I thought I'd be an artist, and then at 10 years old, I realized artists don't really get famous until after they're dead. And as a 10-year-old, I felt like that sucked, and I cried for a while, and then I decided I was going to be an architect. And then I read an article that said architects were overworked and underpaid, and I guess as a kid, I don't know where I'm reading this stuff at, but I didn't want to be overworked and underpaid. That didn't seem like a really great thing. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm really good at math and science. I'm going to be an engineer. And so at 12 years old, I decided I would be an engineer. At 24, I graduated as a mechanical engineer. At 24 and a half, I decided I don't want to be a mechanical engineer anymore. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I felt like, hey, I've been drawing all my life. Maybe I should do something with that. I'm pretty good at it. But I never saw myself as like an artist. Long story short, I decided that I wanted to be a shoemaker. And I went back to school.
I went through that phase too.
Fashion school. I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology and got another bachelor's degree in handbag and shoe design. I graduated. I worked first for Calvin Klein doing some design work as a technical designer for a company called Le Sportsac, and ultimately as a handbag engineer at Coach. It was one of my favorite jobs ever, and then I was kind of had an existential crisis slightly when I realized that we were the second largest polluter next to the oil industry, and that didn't really seem like the most positive thing. So I was like, well, let me think about, is there a way to use design to help for humanity more in focus? And so I didn't know the answer. So of course I do what I always don't know the answer is I went back to school and I got a master's degree in industrial design from Pratt in Brooklyn. While I was there, I got guinea pigged into this program that they call Global Innovation Design. So I spent 6 months studying media design at Keio University in Tokyo. And I spent 4 months studying innovative design engineering at the Royal College of Art and Imperial College in London. And then I came back after all that time being away. I was like, wow, I miss fashion so much. How can I do this in a way that doesn't kill my soul? And then I was like, wow, well, I saw this technology when I was away. Technology is cool. But I was like, wearable tech, that makes sense. But then I was like, well, technically I could be making prison ankle and monitor bracelets. Technically I can make pacemakers. I don't really have a flavor of prisons or hospitals. And so looking at life from a point of view or work from a point of view of life design, I figured it didn't make sense to maybe I should design a job that put me in a place that I was actually interested in being a lot. And when I looked at that, what was I really interested in? I realized that I was deeply interested in movement. I studied martial arts most of my life. I picked up skateboarding on my 33rd birthday. I also knocked out my 2 front teeth on a skateboard when I was 9, which is why I didn't pick up skateboarding until my 33rd birthday. Long story short, I graduated. I spent my time trying to build this Kung Fu suit thesis thing, and then ultimately walked into the market. I wanted to be a wearable technology designer. After 3 schools, I knew what I wanted to do now, but there was only one problem is there was no industry. There was industry. It was Apple and Fitbit, and I applied to multiple jobs at both places, and they didn't hire me for any of those 2 or 3 jobs that I applied for. So I started a company to make wearable technology, and that's how it got me in this space. Initially, I was going to work on my Kung Fu suit, and my co-founder had invited a friend to come speak to a class around accessibility. He was blind and visually impaired, Marcus Engel. He became our advisor. And he talked about Marcus's challenges just finding the building. And he said, hey, you think we can use this haptic stuff to help a person who's blind navigate? And I was like, wow, navigation is just a simpler form of movement than Kung Fu.
Mm-hmm.
All right, other questions? If not, I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
Do you want to come up too? Sure. That was amazing, y'all. Thank you so much for, so maybe just, so many insights, so many resonations between your work. Maybe a round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you everyone for coming. Please feel free to mingle, meet each other, speak to the speakers. We'll be here for maybe 15 or so more minutes. And if you have any questions about UXPA, please come up to any of us. And otherwise, have an amazing evening and an excellent rest of Kansas City Design Week in the spring. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.